Hello friends, today in this video I'm going to be telling the story of the 2018 horror series The Haunting of Hill House. I will recap each individual episode, so if you are just wanting to freshen your memory on a specific episode, you can do that by going to the timestamps in the description below and going to the episode you wish to see. If you want to watch the whole series in less than 20 minutes, you are in the right spot and should stick around to watch the full video. The Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorite horror series of all time. And if you are a fan of horror and haven't seen it, you should definitely change that soon. But if you don't want to commit the whole 11 hours to the show, but want to know the story, continue watching. There obviously will be spoilers here for the whole series, but if you are okay with that, let's give it a go. Episode 1, Steven Sees a Ghost. In the past, the Crane family moves into the infamous Hill House as parents Hugh and Olivia are house flippers and they see a bunch of money they can make. Their youngest child, Nellie, struggles at night as she continues to see a woman that she calls the Bent Neck Lady at the floor of her bed that no one else can see, not even her twin brother Luke. This series follows two timelines, similar to what you see in shows like Lost. Half of it is in the past, when the family was still living at Hill House, and the second timeline is present day, where all of the siblings have grown up and are living their adult lives. In the present timeline, we learn that the mother of the family, Olivia, sadly passed away in the house when the kids were still young, and she did it to herself. At least, that is the story that was portrayed, and the kids were sent off to live with their aunt growing up. The five siblings in order of ages, oldest to youngest, are Stephen, Shirley, Theo, and then the youngest are twins, Nell and Luke. In the present day, oldest brother Stephen is a successful writer who wrote a best-selling novel about his family's experiences at Hill House. He now meets with people who claim to have had encounters with ghosts and writes their stories, but it is all for show and he doesn't really believe in the supernatural, just writes the books to get rich off of, which his siblings frown upon him for. Nellie calls her siblings and tells them that she is worried about her twin brother Luke, but no one takes her claim seriously as Luke is a drug addict now. When Nellie calls her father, he hops on the first plane to California, and unbeknownst to him, she is at the abandoned Hill House. Flashbacks from the kids' childhood at Hill House show disturbing paranormal activity that plagued them every night. Having never seen the same things at the house as his siblings, Stephen develops a cynical attitude towards the supernatural. When he arrives home, he finds Luke leaving, having broken into his house. He then finds Nell inside his apartment. However, Hugh, their father, calls shortly thereafter and reveals that Nell has died. Stephen then realizes that he has just seen his first ghost, but thinks he is just developing a mental illness like the rest of his family. He thinks that their mother passed on her illness to them through her genes. Episode 2, Open Casket. This episode is mainly centered around Shirley, young and old, and she is the second oldest of the siblings. In the past, Shirley discovers kittens that seem to be without a mother and begs her parents to let her keep them. The kittens begin to die one by one, introducing Shirley to the death for the first time, and one of the dead kittens has a bug crawl out of its mouth, and it is disturbing to say the least. No wonder these kids grew up to be damaged adults. In the present day, Shirley, a mortician, grapples with helping a little boy come to terms with seeing his deceased grandmother one last time. After she finds out about Nell's death, she insists that she be the one to take care of Nell's body, having been inspired when she was younger to become a mortician after seeing how her mother was fixed up after she died, and she thinks of it as a work of art. Her siblings don't think she should do Nell's, but Shirley is the bossy one of the siblings and isn't going to take no for an answer. Shirley struggles to explain to her children what has happened to their aunt. Flashbacks reveal that Luke has had multiple rehab stays, and on the day of Nell's wedding, Shirley turned him away from attending due to him being high on heroin. She also vehemently opposed Stephen's book about their childhood, causing a strain within the family, and she still hasn't forgiven him even after he offered her royalties. Episode 3, Touch. Episode 3 is mainly centered around Theo, which is short for Theodora. She is the middle child of the family, and she was given a gift of being able to touch things and people, and she can learn the truth of something just by grabbing it, and she always wears gloves for this reason. Sometimes it can be tough on her always knowing the truth about everything and pretty much being psychic. Theo meets a 9-year-old Kelsey, who is claiming to see a man named Mr. Smiley who is haunting her. In flashbacks, Theo is shown to be a keen observer. One night, she finds Luke in the dumbwaiter, and she agrees to take him for a quick ride upstairs. When he goes down instead of up, Luke is confronted with a mysterious figure that rips his pajamas and leaves Theo distraught. She later decides to investigate the house to prove that Luke was right about the basements because their parents don't believe him. Olivia later tells her that her grandmother, as well as she, has been gifted with the ability to see things by touch, and she gives her gloves to protect her from her thoughts. As I mentioned just a bit ago, in the present day, Theo goes to Kelsey's foster family home and is able to sense that Kelsey's foster father is inappropriately touching her, and she has buried it so deep that she created this Mr. Smiley. Theo then has the cops called and they are able to arrest him. She then goes to see Nell's body and touches her head, causing her to cry out in agony to end the episode. Episode 4, The Twin Thing. This episode is Luke's episode, who is the twin of Nell, as mentioned earlier, and he has a drug problem, probably due to what he went through growing up. A few days prior to Nell's death, Luke is shown getting his 90-day sober chip, with his friend Joey looking on. Flashbacks show Luke talking to a little girl named Abigail as a kid, but no one else can see her. He is also confronted by a tall, floating man who takes a bowler hat from Luke's room after he gets it out of a box of items his mother found. Shortly after Luke gets his chip, Joey decides to leave treatment. Luke decides to go after her and finds her high, which upsets him. He offers to get her help, and after being turned away by the recovery center, they head to Steven's house to ask for help. Lee, Steven's wife, informs Luke that she and Steven have separated and she declines to help them. He then goes to Steven's apartment with the plans to steal some items to pawn, but is caught by Steven, who gives him money instead, as we saw in Steven's episode. Joey thanks Luke for helping her and gives him a kiss while stealing the money out of his pocket and disappearing. Feeling cold and experiencing withdrawal symptoms without getting high, Steven spends the night on the street and gets jumped, while also fighting sightings of the tall, floating man. He eventually gets a hold of his caseworker, Paige, and Steven, who find him on the street looking homeless. Steven informs him that Nell took herself out earlier in the night, and Luke refuses to believe his twin sister would do that. Episode 5, The Bent Neck Lady. Episode 5 and 6 of this series are some of the most epic horror episodes I've ever seen, so I do encourage people to watch this show just to experience these 2 episodes alone. Absolute cinema. This episode is Nell's episode and what actually went down before she did what she did. In the past, Nell begins to see the bent neck lady on her first night at Hill House and the next night as well. Adult Nell goes to a sleep technician to discuss her sleep paralysis, and the two end up going on a date. A montage shows Nell and Arthur dating, getting engaged, and then married. After marriage, he tries to help her during a bout of sleep paralysis, and when he gets up to turn on the lights, he drops dead of an apparent brain aneurysm, and Nell sees the bent neck lady once again. After Arthur's death, Nell sees a new therapist and slowly begins to act out by confronting Theo and Steven and also scoring heroin for Luke before taking him to rehab. After her therapist challenges her to confront her past, Nell travels back to Hill House. Flashbacks show that Hugh took the kids to a motel after leaving Hill House the final night they lived there and came back the next morning covered in blood. Obviously, this would have been the time that the mother died. When adult Nell is back in Hill House, she sees a version of the old, vibrant Hill House, complete with visions of her family and Arthur. When she gets to the top of the staircase, she imagines her mother putting a locket around her neck, when she's really putting a rope around her neck. She then plunges to her death and begins falling through all the many instances she saw the bent neck lady, revealing herself to be the bent neck lady. Seriously, this scene here is so good. I highly recommend to go watch it. Episode 6, Two Storms. The night before Nell's funeral, the Crane family and Kevin gather at the funeral home to pay their respects to Nell on a stormy night. Stories are shared, and both Theo and Steven drink a little too much. When Steven confronts Hugh about withholding information from them their whole lives, it causes Shirley to lash out at him for exploiting their stories for money. It is then revealed to Shirley that Theo actually took the money Steven had offered from the profits of the book, and Kevin, Shirley's husband, did as well behind Shirley's back. Later, Luke confronts his dad over what he believes happened to Nell. Steven and Hugh then begin to argue in the funeral parlor, and Hugh reveals that he believes the house killed Nell. As they are arguing, the casket falls. In the past, flashbacks show a stormy night at Hill House in which the lights go out. While everyone is assembling flashlights, Nell goes missing. While searching for her, Olivia encounters a ghost-like figure in a wheelchair, and then she enters into a trance-like state as Hugh follows her through various hallways. Eventually, she returns back to herself, and she and Hugh hear the children screaming downstairs. The kids tell them that a huge dog got into the house, and when Hugh goes to investigate, Nell reappears out of thin air. She reveals that she was there the whole time yelling and screaming, but no one could see her. Episode 7. Eulogy. While getting ready for Nell's funeral, Hugh speaks to a person who isn't seen by anyone else, and then it's revealed that he talks to the ghost of his wife Olivia, who gives him advice on what to do in certain situations. Hugh and Theo talk, and she apologizes for not trying hard enough with him over the years and is sad that they lost touch with each other for so long. Hugh went to live away after Olivia died, and that is why they had to live with their aunt Janet growing up. Before the funeral, Hugh also tries to connect with Luke, but it doesn't go over too well at first. In the past, the family assesses the damage after the storm, and Hugh discovers there is mold in the walls and moisture pooling, but he struggles to find out where it is coming from. While working with caretaker Mr. Dudley, he tells Hugh about the history of his family and Hill House and suggests that Olivia take some time away from the house as she is beginning to exhibit some extremely bizarre behavior. After repeatedly hearing a scratching in the wall, Hugh investigates and finds the bones of William Hill in the walls behind some bricks. It is then discovered William Hill has been missing for nearly 40 years, and now that cold case is solved. When putting dirt on Nell's grave, Luke sees the ghost forms of both Nell and Olivia, who try to grab him. Shortly thereafter, returning to the funeral home, Luke goes missing, having taken Theo's car and Shirley's debit card, which they assume is him going to use and break his sobriety. Episode 8. Witness Marks. Hugh and Stephen search for Luke, and Stephen lashes out at his dad for hiding the truth about Olivia's death because he doesn't believe in ghosts. He also reveals that he got a vasectomy after college and never told Lee, keeping up the illusion that he could have kids for years. Steve didn't want his kids to suffer the same mental illnesses he believes his family has been given. Shirley finds Theo and her husband Kevin getting obviously close in a closet when the lights went off, and she assumes they were getting it on. Shirley and Theo have it out over what happened in the closet with Theo and Kevin, but a violent knocking on the door and windows of the house forces them to also find Luke. While driving, the two are arguing until a ghost-like form of Nell appears, and Shirley swerves off of the road. Theo then reveals that after she touched Nell's body earlier that week, she felt nothingness inside of her, and when she reached out for Kevin in the closet, she didn't see him, but instead just wanted to feel something. They weren't getting busy with each other. In the past, Stephen paints a vanity for Olivia, but upon receiving it, she smashes it for some odd reason. In present day, Luke shows up to Hill House, wanting to set it on fire and make sure no one else deals with what his family has went through, but the house refuses to go up in flames, and he is grabbed by a ghost from behind to end the episode. Episode 9. Screaming Meemies. After the storm, Olivia talks to Miss Dudley and tells a story from her childhood that involved her being able to grieve her father's death. Later, Olivia is reading when she gets a terrible headache. She goes to get some medicine, and when she returns, she is in Shirley's morgue and she sees Nell's and Luke's adult dead bodies. She mentions the vision to Hugh later, but he thinks she is just stressed out or going crazy. That night she encounters the ghost Poppy Hill in her reading room, and they talk about their fears of losing a child. Poppy Hill used to live in the Hill House, so it's safe to say she is a ghost of the house. After another talk with Hugh, Olivia speeds up her timeline to leave to see Aunt Janet. However, she lies to Hugh and doesn't end up going to her sister's, and instead returns late at night. She wakes Nell and Luke to have a tea party, and also invites Luke's friend Abigail, who is spending the night. They enter the red room, and Olivia pours them all a cup of tea. Shirley wakes Hugh after running into Olivia, and he realizes that Olivia has spiked the children's tea with rat poison. He arrives at the red room a minute too late as Abigail has drunk the tea and dies. Hugh knocks Olivia into a wall, which leaves her incapacitated for a few minutes while he gathers up the children to leave, as we saw earlier. While left alone, Olivia talks to Poppy and laments that she just wants to wake up before falling to her death. Episode 10, Series Finale. Silence lay steadily. To kick off the finale, we see in the past, Nell and Shirley tried to enter the red room, and Theo is shown on the other side of the door in her dance room. Adult Steve and Hugh enter the house, and Steven sees Luke lying on the floor of the red room and rushes inside. The door shuts behind him, leaving Hugh out. In the present day, Steven is writing about the night they all went to Hill House to find Luke and talking to a very pregnant Lee. She eventually begins making fun of Steven, and her body begins to deteriorate. Nell appears to Steven and leads him out of the dream. Luke, Shirley, and Theo all confront different situations, in which Nell leads them out and they awaken in the red room. They all believe Luke to be dead until he comes back after Nell stops him from drinking the tea in his visions of the last time he was in the red room. Nell appears to all the siblings and explains to them what the red room was to each of them. She is also able to make amends with each of them. Hugh wakes up outside the room and speaks with Olivia, who refuses to let him into the red room and rescue the children for fear of being alone again. He makes a deal with her and she opens the door so Thea and Shirley can take Luke to the hospital. After they're gone, Hugh takes Steven back into Hill House so he can see what went on the night Olivia died. It's revealed that Abigail was the Dudley's daughter, and they came looking for her and discovered that Olivia had murdered her. They made a deal with Hugh to preserve the house so they could see the ghost version of Abigail, and they would never tell anyone what happened that night so everyone could keep their memories of Olivia alive. It is also revealed that adult Hugh sacrificed himself to Olivia in the house so that the children could get out of that room. He then leaves the house to Steven and joins Olivia and Nell in the red room. The flash forward shows everyone together celebrating Luke's anniversary of 2 years sober. And that is it for this one, friends. Is there any other series that I should do? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be glad to do them. Thanks for watching.